to Lester.
Chris, thanks. Hopeless, helpless, and lost. That's how the family of Seung-Hui describes what they are feeling in their first statement since Monday's deadly shootings at Virginia Tech. It was issued by Joe's sister, who had this to say about her brother. "This is someone that I grew up with and loved. Now I feel like I didn't know this person." What were the warning signs his family may have missed? We're joined this morning by psychologist Dr. Dale Atkins, forensic specialist Dr. N.G. Burrell, and Christine On from the Korea Policy Institute. And welcome to all of you, and thanks for being with us. Dale, let me begin with you. Why is it so difficult for a family to see the signs? Is it that the person is not exhibiting the same behavior at home that they might at school or work?
Very often that's the case. It's not unusual that you see a different person at home from a person who is with peers, especially someone who isn't treated well outside of the home, or maybe very quiet, very reserved, and within himself perhaps almost living in a shell, and you get used to the behavior at home and you don't necessarily see what might be going on outside of the home.
You just know them. He's always been a little quiet and shy. That's his nature.
Yes.
And that's not a warning sign necessarily.
And you may attribute that. That's right, that it may not be a warning sign at all. And then when you add to it, you know, no friends, or the issue that's concerning me was, you know, how he was treated outside of the home and really trying to fit in and not being able to and being mocked. But again, you know, everybody's very different, and you can't really tell if you're living with someone that they are in such trouble. But if you do have suspicion, you really do want to try and get some help as a family.
And Christine, let me turn to you, and I want to talk about cultural differences and how psychological help is viewed. There's strong evidence that in the Korean community, many Asian American communities, the idea is not easily embraced. Is that fair to say?
Well, I can only speak from personal experience and just sort of observing the Korean American culture, and I would agree with you that there is sort of a taboo to speak publicly about mental illness, but I wouldn't say that that's strictly just a Korean or even an Asian issue. I think, you know, probably the rest of the world has not really come out in dealing with mental illness, and I think it's only been recent that you know, the American population has been speaking publicly about mental illness. But I think it is interesting to point out that Korean Americans are the largest ethnic minority group in the United States that do not have access to health insurance. And I also learned yesterday that Seung-Hui was diagnosed with autism at a young age, but that his parents, you know, because they're working class immigrants and they're struggling to put food on the table, that, you know, they didn't have the resources.
So the intervention wasn't then there early that
they didn't really have the access.
Capture this. And let me turn to Dr. N.G. Burrell. What should a family look for? Again, we just talked, you know, Dale noted the fact that some things seem normal. This is the person, you know, you've always known him as being shy and quiet. What specifically would the warning signs be that we've got to get some professional help here?
Sure. I think social isolation is one thing. I think a preoccupation with morbid themes, preoccupation with violent themes, locking oneself away, secluding oneself, being sort of out of step, out of kilter with the rest of the family. And if there's evidence, for example, of diaries, or, you know, parents are vigilant enough to see websites that they're going on, and you see that it relates to guns, mass murder, etc. I don't know how loud you have to ring that bell, but there it is.
In this case, you of course didn't treat him, but looking at what we know, that this wasn't just a sudden snap, that this was a slow buildup. Was he at the point of clinical psychosis?
You know, it's hard to know not examining him. However, I do know this, that when you get to that place, psychologically, where you're prepared to kill yourself and commit a mass murder, you do undergo a transformation. I mean, you've got to sort of get into a zone. I hate to liken it to athletics, but, you know, you're a different person when you step foot on that campus. You're not the guy you were back in the dorm room the day before. You've got to say, I'm ready to go. And when you're ready to go, the world changes. The psychological reality testing changes.
And Christine, he'd been in the country since he was 8. Can you rule out cultural assimilation, or at this point, if you've been here since you were 8, that you tend to see the world through native eyes?
Well, I would say that he's pretty Americanized. I mean, if you actually see the footage of the videos that he produced before or in between the shootings, I mean, he speaks English pretty well without much of a Korean accent, and I feel like he was using a lot of American icons and symbols, and he was a creative writing major. I mean, and I think that's really important, and I think that's been actually quite problematic, that the media has portrayed this to be a Korean problem when it's really not a Korean problem. It's the fact that he's an individual that was deeply disturbed and very violent.
Has there been, you say the media's been portraying that, I don't know if that's always a fair statement, but it was pointed out certainly from the beginning that the shooter was Asian American.
And the words were, you know, foreign, illegal, you know, I think that sometimes...
Have you seen a backlash?
Well, I think it's a little bit too early to say, but we've definitely been, you know, gathering some reports. I've seen some hate emails, you know, ranging from, oh, get out of this country, Koreans, go back to your, you know, your crappy little country, to, you know, shame on you, Koreans. And, you know, I think that's a real disservice to the family and to the victims, because we need to get to the root causes of why this violence even occurs in the first place.
Right. And Dr. Atkins, let's talk about those root causes. He was a loner. He had been teased at points like this. Does all this, if you've already got some sort of mental problem, does this quickly exacerbate the problem and speed it along to this point of rage?
Well, I'm not sure about the quickness, but it certainly, if untreated or treated wrongly, can certainly exacerbate. But the other thing, and I think that Dr. Burrell really pointed out a lot of these underlying issues, what you also see are issues having to do with looking at the world as a place. You know, you look through these darkened eyes, and it's a very different world, as you mentioned. And I think one of the things we have to pay attention to is, you know, you look at the world and you look at society, and you've been wronged, you feel as if you've been wronged, and you keep lists, and you keep these injustices, and you say, okay, now it's really my turn, and I'm going to make things right in the world. And you look at yourself as someone who might be able to save the world from all of these people who are no longer going to be helpful and who hurt you badly. So you can, you know, in this case, I think it was planned out. It wasn't a snap, and although certainly one does snap, but this was a premeditation because he thought about it.
Yeah, we've got to end the conversation there, but it's a good one to have, and I think we're all trying to learn from this.
Yes.
And stop it from happening again. But I want to thank you all for taking time to be here and talking with us. Dr. Dale Atkins, Dr. N.G. Burrell, and Christine Ahn. Thanks again. And we'll be right back after this.